Some poorer countries may not see the COVID-19 vaccine until 2024. That's according to internal documents seen by Reuters. They show the WHO's global scheme to deliver the vaccines faces a very high risk of failure, potentially leaving nations home to billions of people vulnerable to the virus. The World Health Organization's COVAX program is the main global scheme to vaccinate people in poor and middle-income countries around the world. It aims to deliver at least 2 billion vaccine doses by the end of 2021 to cover 20% of the most vulnerable people in 91 countries, mostly in Africa, Asia and Latin America. But internal documents show the scheme's promoters say the program is struggling from a lack of funds, supply risks and complex contractual arrangements. All of these could make it impossible to achieve their goals. The report says the risk of failure is higher because the scheme was set up so quickly, operating in, quote, uncharted territory. The WHO did not respond to a request for comment.
Back in January of 2017, President Trump falsely claimed that he drew the biggest inauguration crowd ever. 4 years later, President-elect Joe Biden's inaugural committee is actually urging Americans to stay home. The coronavirus pandemic reshaping Biden's January 20th inauguration plans, starting with a public message Tuesday from the event's organizers. Don't travel to Washington to see Biden sworn in. Although he and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will take their oaths on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, as is traditional, the swearing-in ceremony and parade that follows will have limited attendance and be reimagined, the inaugural committee said in a statement Tuesday. That likely means no throngs of sidewalk supporters to wave to, or for that matter, packed-in protesters to pass by. The usual shoulder-to-shoulder celebratory meal could be nixed, or at least socially distanced, with celebrity performances likely held from remote locations. In that way, Biden's inauguration could look similar to last summer's Democratic convention, which featured virtual programs with participants across the nation. Biden spent much of the campaign following COVID-19 safety protocols, holding relatively few in-person events. Trump has yet to concede the election.
Ayes 55, noes 0.
Despite this week's Electoral College vote affirming Biden's win, and it is unclear whether he will attend Biden's swearing-in ceremony or meet with him at the White House as is custom. Biden's planning committee said more details about his inauguration will be announced in the coming weeks that both keep people safe and honor the, quote, grand traditions of the presidency.
I will be president for all Americans.
A Brexit trade deal can still be done. That was the assessment of European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday. Britain and the EU are in the final part of talks to keep around $1 trillion of annual trade free of tariffs and quotas beyond December 31st. On that date, the UK finally transitions out of the world's largest trading bloc.
There is a path to an agreement now. The path may be very narrow, but it is there. And it is there for our responsibility to continue trying.
When asked about von der Leyen's optimistic tone, one UK official said, quote, "We've made some progress, but we are still very far apart in key areas, still not there." Sticking points still include access to UK fishing waters and how to ensure a level playing field for competition. In Parliament Wednesday, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson tried to sound hopeful though.
Mr. Speaker, there's every opportunity, notwithstanding the slight air of, uncharacteristic air of gloom from the right honourable gentleman, there's every opportunity, every hope I have that our friends and partners across the Channel will see sense and do a deal.
For now, there's still no clarity on when talks will have to conclude, but von der Leyen says the coming few days will be decisive.
China is a more familiar target, but now the US Treasury has Switzerland in its sights. On Wednesday, Washington labelled the country as a currency manipulator. That means it's suspected of deliberately devaluing its currency against the dollar to win advantage. Vietnam was also added to the list. The action comes as the global slowdown skews trade flows and widens US deficits with trading partners. That is an irritant for President Donald Trump, who came to office promising to narrow trade gaps. To be labelled a manipulator, countries must have at least a $20 billion trade surplus with the US. They also have to have a record of significant intervention in currency markets. The Treasury refused to say whether the two countries would face any sanctions as a result of the designation, but it also extended the list of places it was keeping a close eye on as potential manipulators. Taiwan, Thailand and India went on that list, joining China, Japan, Germany and others. Switzerland, at least, seems undaunted. The Swiss National Bank denied manipulating the country's franc currency and said it would continue its monetary approach unchanged. Even so, the franc jumped to 5-year highs against the dollar after Wednesday's news.
The European Union has postponed nearly €90 million in aid to Ethiopia amid concerns over a crisis in the Tigray region, according to an internal EU document. The delay appears to be intended to pressure Ethiopian authorities to respond to the bloc's call for access to the region, where 5 weeks of war have created a humanitarian crisis. A convoy of aid from the International Red Cross reached the capital Mekelle for the first time at the weekend. But some agencies say a deal struck between the government and the United Nations to allow access is too restrictive and that security remains a problem. 2 foreign NGOs have reported staff killed and a UN security team has been shot at. Stefan Dujarric, spokesman for the UN Secretary General, said more than 63,000 people have been recorded as internally displaced, but that the figure is expected to change if access to the region is allowed.
Our humanitarian colleagues continue to tell us of dire shortages of food, water, fuel, cash and electricity, as well as telecommunication services and other vital supplies in the Tigray region.
According to the EU document, seen by Reuters and authenticated by a senior diplomatic official in Addis Ababa, the 27-nation bloc is calling for an end to hostilities, an investigation into human rights abuses, and for journalists to be allowed into the region. It says that 3 budget support disbursements were being postponed to create political space and to request a response to the EU's concerns, in particular around humanitarian access, cessation of hostilities and media access. A spokeswoman for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed directed requests for comment to the Finance Ministry, which did not immediately respond. There was also no immediate response to a request for comment from the European Union.
World stocks rose to record highs on Wednesday as investors cheered the prospect of coronavirus vaccines and more US fiscal stimulus. European stocks in the euro also got a boost after economic data came in better than expected. Manufacturers reported strong growth, fueled by rising exports and booming performance from Germany. The latest Composite Purchasing Managers Index for the Eurozone, seen as a good guide to economic health, soared to 49.8 in December from 45.3 last month. That's just short of the 50 mark that indicates growth and well above economist forecasts. The numbers suggest that a second wave of infections and new lockdowns had less of an impact than earlier this year. All the upbeat data, plus rising hopes of a Brexit trade deal, sent European shares to their highest since February. The Pan-European Stock 600 rose 0.9% in early deals. Germany's DAX stock index shot up 1.6% and was set for its best session in 3 months. Sentiment was helped after US congressional leaders reported progress in talks on another round of fiscal stimulus. The MSCI World Stocks Index rose 0.4% to a record high. Since early November, the index has climbed 15%, driven by trillions of dollars worth of global stimulus and a more positive outlook. Investors now turn their attention to the outcome of the US Federal Reserve's 2-day meeting. Details from that could show whether policymakers think the US is on course for a double-dip recession or on the brink of a vaccine-inspired boom.
A man has been sentenced to death in Japan for the murders of 9 people in 2017. Ending a case that grabbed local headlines as the Twitter killer. 30-year-old Takahiro Shiraishi was found guilty of murdering, dismembering, and storing the bodies of the victims in his apartment outside Tokyo. According to the GG news agency, the prosecution said Shiraishi first contacted the 9 on Twitter after they expressed suicidal thoughts. The agency also says he used a handle that loosely translates to hangman, and that Shiraishi invited the victims to his home, promising to help them die. Kyodo News reported that his defense lawyers argued he killed the victims with their approval. The judge ruled the victims did not consent to being killed, and that Shiraishi was mentally fit to be held responsible for their murders. One juror in the case spoke to the media on Wednesday.
When I listened to his testimony, it made me imagine the killings he committed inside my head. Sometimes I remembered the savage ways he committed the murders at night, so it was a bit of a burden on me.
According to Japanese media, Shiraishi said before the trial that even if he was handed the death penalty, he would not appeal. In Japan, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, with the execution dates not made public until after it happens.